Picture this: a quiet suburban neighbourhood, an impeccably maintained house, and a tenant who turned it into a snake-breeding farm. Imagine the peace and tranquility of suburbia, the perfectly manicured lawns, the children playing in the streets, the neighbours waving to each other as they take their morning walks. Now, picture a house in this idyllic setting, a beautiful property well kept and cared for. But there's a twist. The tenant, instead of enjoying the tranquility, decided to turn the property into a snake-breeding farm. Yes, you heard it right, a snake-breeding farm right in the heart of suburbia. The unsuspecting landlord had rented out his precious property to someone who seemed like a perfect tenant, only to find out that he was harbouring a slithering secret, and what a discovery it was. When the landlord came for a routine check, he was greeted by a scene straight out of a horror movie. Snakes of different sizes and colours, writhing, hissing and slithering all over the place. The beautiful house had been transformed into a terrifying spectacle, a breeding ground for snakes. The shock of the homeowners was beyond words. The neighbours too were taken aback, to say the least. After all, who expects to live next door to a snake farm? The quiet, peaceful neighbourhood was thrown into a state of panic and fear. The legal implications were severe. Breeding snakes without a permit is illegal, and the tenant faced hefty fines and even jail time. The landlord too had to bear the brunt. The damage to the property was extensive, and the process of eviction was long and arduous. It was a nightmare that they will remember for a lifetime. So there it is, our first shocking eviction story. A quiet suburban house turned into a snake-breeding farm, a landlord's worst nightmare, a neighbourhood's unforeseen turn of events. Just when you think you've seen it all, wait until you hear about our next shocking eviction story. From a snake-breeding farm, we move to a more common but equally shocking scenario, a hoarder's paradise. Now imagine this. A tenant who seemed ordinary and unassuming, yet behind closed doors, was nurturing a secret so vast and overwhelming that it would fill every nook and cranny of the rented property. The landlord, unsuspecting, was in for the shock of his life when he discovered that his property had been transformed into a junkyard. The tenant, it seems, had a predilection for collecting, or more accurately, hoarding, everything from old newspapers and magazines to broken furniture, discarded electronics and even food wrappers. The entire property was filled to the brim with junk, creating a labyrinth of clutter that was not only unsightly, but also posed serious health hazards. The smell alone was enough to knock you off your feet. Years of accumulated garbage had turned the property into a breeding ground for mould, pests and bacteria. Fire hazards lurked in every corner, and the structural integrity of the house was compromised due to the sheer weight of the hoard. The cost of cleaning up such a mess was astronomical. Not only did the landlord have to hire a professional cleaning crew, but he also had to deal with the costs of repairing the damage to the property. The walls needed repainting, the carpets had to be replaced, and the entire plumbing system required an overhaul due to blockages caused by the hoard. The tenant was evicted, of course, but the scars left behind were a painful reminder of the ordeal. It was a wake-up call for the landlord, who had learned the hard way that appearances can be deceiving, and that even the most ordinary-looking tenant can harbour extraordinary secrets. As disturbing as that was, our next story takes the shock factor to a whole new level. Our third shocking eviction story takes us to a property that was turned into a makeshift hostel. Now, imagine being a landlord and discovering that your tenant has transformed your property into an illegal boarding house, packed to the brim with more than a dozen uninvited guests. This is not your everyday nightmare, but a reality for one unfortunate landlord. The tenant, let's call him Mr. Smith, was initially a model renter. He paid his dues on time and rarely caused any trouble. But then, things started to turn sour. Neighbours began complaining about the constant stream of strangers coming and going at all hours. The landlord, suspicious, decided to pay a visit. Imagine the shock when the landlord discovered that Mr. Smith had transformed the property into an overcrowded hostel. People were crammed into every available space, with barely any room to move. The once pristine property was now in a state of disarray, with damages that would cost thousands to repair. But the story doesn't end there. When the landlord confronted Mr. Smith, he learned that his tenant had been pocketing the rent from these uninvited guests. The landlord, of course, hadn't received a dime. Now, the legal implications of such a situation are vast. Illegally subletting a property is a serious violation of a lease agreement. It can lead to immediate eviction and hefty fines. The landlord was within their rights to evict Mr. Smith and his dozen or so uninvited guests. This story serves as a stark reminder that while renting out a property can be a great source of income, it also comes with its fair share of risks. Landlords must stay vigilant, ensuring their properties are being respected and their tenants are abiding by the agreed terms. If you thought that was outrageous, wait until you hear our next story. Now, imagine finding out your property has been turned into a meth lab. This is the chilling reality for our fourth landlord, who was left reeling after making this shocking discovery. In a quiet suburban neighbourhood, where children ride their bikes and neighbours wave hello, a dark secret was brewing behind closed doors. Our unsuspecting landlord, let's call him John, had rented his property to what he thought was a respectful, reliable tenant. But as time went on, there were signs that something was amiss. John started receiving complaints from neighbours about strange smells and unusual activity at night. Concerned, John decided to pay a visit to the property, but nothing could have prepared him for what he found. The once cosy family home had been transformed into a full-blown meth lab. The discovery of a meth lab in a rental property is not just shocking, but also extremely dangerous. Meth labs are volatile environments with a high risk of explosion due to the toxic and flammable chemicals used in the manufacturing process. The health risks for individuals exposed to these chemicals are significant, ranging from respiratory issues to severe skin burns. The legal implications of this discovery were staggering. The tenant was evicted immediately and criminal charges were filed. But for John, the nightmare was far from over. The cleanup process following the discovery of a meth lab is extensive and costly. Every surface, every piece of furniture, every inch of the property is potentially contaminated. Professionals must be hired to ensure the property is safe for habitation again, a process that can take weeks, even months, and can cost tens of thousands of dollars. This story is a harsh reminder of the potential dangers that landlords face. It also underscores the importance of regular property checks and maintaining open communication with neighbours who can often spot unusual activity. As shocking as that was, nothing compares to our final eviction story. So, brace yourself as we delve into the most bizarre eviction story yet. Our final story takes us to a house that was turned into a zoo. Yes, you heard it right, a zoo. Now, this isn't your typical Noah's Ark scenario. We're talking about a tenant who thought it was a good idea to house a collection of exotic animals in a rented property. This menagerie included everything from a pair of macaws, known for their vibrant colours and ear-shattering squawks, to a full-grown capuchin monkey, notorious for their mischievous behaviour. Let's not forget the reptilian residents, a collection of snakes that would send a chill down any herpetophobe's spine. The condition of the house, as you can imagine, was beyond the pale. The once pristine hardwood floors were scratched and stained, the walls bore the signs of attempted escapes, and the smell, well, let's just say it was far from pleasant. The discovery of this indoor zoo led to a swift eviction, but that was just the beginning of the landlord's challenges. The legal implications were numerous and complex, involving animal control agencies, health departments, and even the local police. The tenant faced hefty fines and potential jail time for housing exotic wildlife without proper permits and for causing significant property damage. All this, while the landlord was left to deal with the monumental task of restoring the property. From snakes to hoarders to meth labs, these eviction stories are a reminder of the unforeseen risks landlords may face. These shocking stories serve as a stark reminder. Due diligence is key when renting out your property. From unforeseen events to hoarders' tales, uninvited guests, startling discoveries, and even a zoo house, the importance of thorough tenant screening cannot be overstated. It's a wild world out there, but with careful vetting and a dash of skepticism, you can avoid such nightmares. If you enjoyed these shocking eviction stories, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like this video, leave your comments below and share it with your friends. Stay tuned for more unbelievable stories here on Whatever Top 5 Videos.